Monsieur Lacroix, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about one of the United Nations' most important functions, if not the most important, and that is international peacekeeping. That is something that is under your purview. China, of course, is a significant contributor to both the finances of peacekeeping operations as well as troops. How would you characterize China's involvement in international peacekeeping operations?
Thank you very much for having me, and it's giving me a good opportunity to talk about China's support to peacekeeping just a few days after I visited Beijing and had a number of meetings with officials and the Chinese government. Indeed, I mean, China is a very important partner to peacekeeping in many different ways. As you noted, China is one of the most important financial contributors to peacekeeping. But it's also one of the most important troop and police contributing countries to peacekeeping, and of course, it is very important for us to count on this continued support. I would also add that we have had the support of China to the initiatives that we have taken, that we are currently implementing regarding the improvement of peacekeeping. And I have in mind, in particular, the leadership role that China has taken regarding the very critical file of the safety and security of peacekeepers. China has initiated a resolution of the Security Council on this very important topic, and also has been very instrumental in the creation of the group of member states, so-called group of friends of the safety and security of peacekeepers. So just, I mean, these are really the many areas in which we're able to count on China's support. Of course, it's highly appreciated.
Right, you talk about the safety of peacekeepers, and of course we live in a rapidly changing world where there are new challenges emerging all the time. This is the 75th anniversary of UN peacekeeping. In recent years, we've seen things like the scourge of terrorism. We've seen how organized crime has got involved in many countries, destabilizing many societies as well. We've seen the level of violence in many countries. I mean, one could take Haiti as an example. What are the challenges, the new challenges that you and UN peacekeeping is facing right now?
Indeed, we are facing significant challenges, and I would say that most of our peacekeeping operations have had a deteriorated political and security environment over the last couple of years, even if I compare with 2 or 3 years ago. I think probably one of our key challenges is political, and is the fact that we have an international community membership that is more divided than before. And of course, that has an impact on our peacekeeping operation, and that particularly has an impact on the fact that we cannot count anymore on a united and strong and committed support and active support from our member states to the political processes that are linked with our peacekeeping operations. Every peacekeeping operation is deployed to support political efforts. But so that division across our membership is weakening the ability of the international community to actively and support these peace processes, and also in a united manner. But we're also facing challenges related to the evolution of conflict. You mentioned terrorism, which is an important factor that is affecting our peacekeepers in many places around the world. We are faced with the evolving threats, such as the increased use of improvised explosive devices that are affecting our peacekeepers, various sophisticated attacks against our people and our camps. And we're also facing the increasing threats of misinformation, disinformation, which is really weaponized now, and which has become a major threat to our peacekeepers, but also to the population that we're supporting. So, with all these challenges, what we need to do is to continue to adapt. We need to continue and even step up our efforts in terms of supporting better safety and security conditions for our peacekeepers, supporting the fight against misinformation, disinformation, adapting peacekeeping to the evolving digital technologies, making sure that we can make the best use of these technologies, continue our efforts to improve the number and role of women in peacekeeping, which is a key condition for the efficiency of our operations. So we need to do all this. And I really appreciate the fact that China has always been very supportive to all these initiatives.
Do you find that there is a recognition among member states that you do face these new challenges and that, as you point out, you need to adapt? I mean, is the will there?
I think there is a recognition of the challenges, and I think there is also a recognition of the fact that we need to adapt. And indeed, all the initiatives that are mentioned to you and that are sort of regrouped under the umbrella initiative of the Secretary General of the United Nations, which is called Action for Peacekeeping. All these initiatives are widely supported by our member states. Now, I believe that it is also important to look at the fact that even if many of our peacekeeping operations are faced with the lack of progress in the political processes that they are supporting, it is important to be aware of the fact that thanks to the presence of our peacekeepers, ceasefires are being maintained. In other words, our peacekeepers prevent the resumption of facilities in many places where they are deployed. And our peacekeepers are also protecting hundreds of thousands of civilians every single day. And sometimes they are doing this alone with very few, if any, presence of the security forces of host government. And I think it's important to be aware because it is always important to think of, okay, what would happen if these peace operations were not there? What would be the consequences? And I believe that some of the developments in some countries where peacekeeping operations were deployed at a point and are not there anymore, I think should give us a pause, or at least should really make us think about, what is the alternative? What if those peacekeeping operations were not there anymore?
Unfortunately, we live in a world that is still beset by violence. I mean, if we look over the last few years, or the last few decades, I should say, we've seen some of the worst atrocities being committed. If we look at the violence that took place in the Balkans or the Rwandan genocide. Are there any lessons that UN peacekeeping has learned to prevent a recurrence of these kinds of tragedies happening in the future?
Absolutely. I think first of all, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres puts a lot of emphasis on prevention, and I think it is critically important to be more effective in preventing conflict, which implies that first of all we need more unity across the international community, but we also need to work to do more on the drivers of conflict. I would mention the impact of climate change. I would mention the impact of global terrorism. I would mention also the impact of transnational criminal activities, such as the exploitation of natural resources or the various trafficking in arms or human beings or drugs. And all of this is massively fueling conflict around the world. In terms of peacekeeping itself, of course, peacekeeping needs to be more effective in protecting civilians. It is always very challenging and always confronted with the fact that expectations are very high when the peacekeepers are given the mandate of protecting civilians. But even with this challenge, again, I repeat that our peacekeepers are protecting civilians hundreds of thousands of them every single day in many places around the world. But we need to be better, and this is why we need to work on the important issues such as improving situational awareness. In other words, improving the ability of our peacekeepers to know about the threats, to know about the environment, and also to be more reactive with increase and enhancement of their mobility, enhancement of the coordination between the civilian part, the police, and the military part. More women in peacekeeping also improves our ability to protect civilians and also to know better about the threats that are affecting those civilians. So there's a wide array of initiatives that are needed, really, and that we need to pursue vigorously, really, to make sure that we do as best as possible in regarding our mandate for the protection of civilians.
Right, so UN peacekeepers, as you point out, are protecting hundreds of thousands of civilians around the world. Where do you see on the ground your biggest challenges right now?
Well, I would say that most of our peacekeeping operations are facing challenges. I think, of course, we are currently in the process of withdrawing our peacekeeping mission in Mali as a result of the decision by the Malian authorities. So that is the immediate challenge that we face, and against the backdrop of a situation that is challenging. But we are doing our best, of course, to make sure that this will happen in the best possible conditions. Otherwise, I believe that we, as I say, I mean, we are unfortunately seeing a deteriorated security environment in many, if not most, of our peacekeeping mission, be it in Africa or in the Middle East or elsewhere in Europe. And I think that is really a concern. Again, I think that in those critical times, what we need is, number one, to make sure that our member states fully understand the challenges that we face and act accordingly, meaning that we need continuous support to our initiatives to improve safety and security, effectiveness, situational awareness, and adapting to the evolving technologies and all this. And we need as much unity as possible from our member states in support of our peacekeeping operations. I know it's challenging because we have a divided membership, but our missions, our peacekeeping missions, are their mission. They are the missions of our member states. The member states decide on their mandate and decide on their finance. So we need them to be really as supportive as possible. I again appreciate the fact that we have received continuous support from China to the efforts that we're making to make sure that our peacekeeping operations will be up to the task.
Right now, the international community is focused on the conflict in Ukraine. It's having an impact around the world, and the two sides are no nearer a diplomatic solution. Do you think the deployment of UN peacekeeping force could form part of a wider negotiated solution to this conflict?
Well, I think that we are definitely not there at this point, and I don't really know whether at a later stage that option would be considered. The Secretary General recently said that he would be ready, of course, to be more involved in peace efforts, and at the same time, you would have noted that he indicated also that unfortunately he thought that at this point the time was not there, or the conditions were not there for such a role. But we are all hopeful, of course, that the time will come when more efforts towards a peaceful solution, according to the resolution of the General Assembly, the conditions will be there.
Monsieur Lacroix, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. All the best.